I am Stella, a 65-year-old retired elementary school teacher from Michigan. For 3 days, I prepared a Christmas feast for my only son Andrew and his wife Tiffany. I polished my best china, cooked all his childhood favorites, and wrapped thoughtful gifts. Now, I sit alone at my beautifully decorated table, checking my watch for the third time this hour. The candles are melting, the food is getting cold, and the silence in my home is deafening. My heart feels heavy as I realize they aren't coming. Before I tell you what happened that Christmas evening and how it changed everything, let me know where you're watching from. Please, subscribe if you've ever felt the sting of family disappointment. Being a widow wasn't something I ever prepared for. 8 years ago, my husband Robert collapsed from a heart attack while shoveling snow from our driveway. One moment he was waving at me through the kitchen window, and the next, he was gone forever. The grief nearly swallowed me whole, but Andrew became my anchor through those dark days. Andrew was always a sensitive child, different from the other boys in the neighborhood who preferred sports and rough play. My son found joy in quieter pursuits, reading books about birds, helping me in the garden, and spending hours observing the feathered visitors to our backyard. When he was 12, he built me a bird feeder as a Mother's Day gift, painstakingly measuring and cutting each piece of wood himself. That bird feeder became a symbol of our special bond. Life moved forward as it always does. Andrew grew up, went to college, and built a successful career as an architectural engineer. 5 years ago, he met Tiffany at a colleague's wedding. She was stunningly beautiful with long auburn hair, impeccable style, and an air of confidence that seemed to command any room she entered. Andrew was instantly smitten. "Mom, she's amazing," he told me during our weekly phone call after their third date. "She works in luxury real estate, knows all the right people, and somehow she's interested in me." I was happy for him truly, but something in the way he said, "somehow she's interested in me," gave me pause. My Andrew had always struggled with self-confidence despite his intelligence and kindness. Tiffany came from a wealthy family. Her father owned several car dealerships across the state, and her mother was a former beauty queen who now organized charity galas. They lived in a mansion overlooking Lake Michigan and took exotic vacations twice a year. The wedding 3 years ago was lavish beyond anything our family had ever experienced. Tiffany's parents spared no expense. Ice sculptures, a 10-piece orchestra, 500 guests, many of whom I had never met. I felt out of place in my department store dress, among women dripping in designer labels. During the reception, I overheard Tiffany's mother, Martha, telling another guest, "Andrew seems nice enough. Not what we pictured for Tiffany, but he's stable and has good prospects." The subtle tensions that began that day only grew with time. At first, the changes were small. Andrew's calls became less frequent, their visits to my home shorter. Whenever they did visit, Tiffany would spend most of the time checking her phone, offering polite but distant smiles when I tried to engage her in conversation. I made countless efforts to connect with my daughter-in-law. I invited her for cooking lessons when she mentioned wanting to learn family recipes. I suggested shopping trips to our local boutiques. I even joined a book club she mentioned liking, hoping to find common ground. But Tiffany maintained her polite distance, always with an excuse for why we couldn't spend more time together. "Tiffany's just busy with work, Mom." Andrew would explain, a flicker of something like apology in his eyes. "The real estate market is really demanding right now." I could see my son was torn. During rare moments alone, he'd become his old self, laughing at our inside jokes, reminiscing about his childhood. But the moment Tiffany appeared, he would change. His posture more rigid, his jokes more careful, his attention divided. My suburban home grew quieter after Robert passed away. Without work to structure my days, I found solace in my garden and my birds. Every morning, I would fill the bird feeder Andrew made watching chickadees, cardinals, and occasional woodpeckers visit throughout the day. I joined a local birdwatching club, made some casual friends, but nothing filled the hole left by my increasingly absent son. 2 months before Christmas, I called Andrew to invite him and Tiffany for the holiday. "I'd love to cook for you both," I said, "just like old times." There was a pause, and I could hear muffled voices as though he was covering the phone. "That sounds nice, Mom," he finally said. "Let me check with Tiffany and get back to you." To my surprise and delight, he called back the next day with a yes. For the first time in months, I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this Christmas dinner would be the turning point, a chance to rebuild what had been slowly eroding between us. The moment Andrew confirmed they would come for Christmas dinner, I began planning. Despite my limited retirement income, I wanted everything to be perfect. I spent weeks searching for the right gifts. A handmade quilt from a local artisan for their home, knowing how Tiffany loved interior design, and 2 rare first edition books about North American birds for Andrew's collection. I budgeted carefully, cutting back on my own expenses to afford these treasures. The quilt cost nearly $300, and the books even more, but seeing their faces when they open these gifts would be worth every penny. I wrapped them in beautiful paper with hand-tied bows, placing them under my small Christmas tree in the living room. 3 days before Christmas, I began cooking. Andrew had always loved my traditional holiday dishes: honey-glazed ham, scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole with the crispy onions on top, homemade rolls, and my special cranberry sauce with orange zest. For dessert, his favorite apple pie with cinnamon ice cream. "You're going all out this year," said my neighbor Janet when she stopped by with a Christmas card and saw my kitchen counters covered with ingredients and baking sheets. "Andrew and Tiffany are coming," I replied, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. "It's the first Christmas dinner I've hosted since Robert passed." I spent hours setting the dining room table with our family heirloom china, the set my mother had given me when Robert and I got married. I polished the silver until it gleamed, arranged crystal glasses at each place setting, and spread my hand-embroidered tablecloth over the table. Each fork and knife was perfectly aligned, each napkin folded into an elegant shape I'd learned from a YouTube video. The house transformed with decorations. I hung the ornaments Robert and I had collected over 40 years of marriage, including the handmade ones Andrew created in elementary school. A clothespin reindeer with googly eyes, a salt dough star painted with glitter, a paper chain garland yellowed with age, but precious in memory. In the evenings, as I sat resting my aching feet, I worked on a special surprise, a photo album chronicling our family history. I included pictures of Andrew's childhood, his graduation moments with his father, and some recent photos with Tiffany. I wrote little captions beneath each one, hoping this visual reminder of our shared history might bridge whatever gap had formed between us. My sister Laura called from Florida the night before Christmas Eve. "Don't get your hopes too high, Stella," she cautioned after I spent 20 minutes detailing my preparations. "I don't want to see you hurt if things don't go as planned." "It will be fine," I insisted. "Andrew seemed genuinely excited when we spoke last week." As if on cue, my phone pinged with a text from him, "Looking forward to tomorrow, Mom." Those 5 simple words kept me awake most of the night, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe Tiffany would finally warm up to me. Maybe Andrew would stay longer than the usual rushed visit. Maybe by New Year's we would have re-established our close relationship. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. I was up before sunrise, putting the finishing touches on dishes, setting out appetizers, arranging a beautiful centerpiece of pine branches and red candles. I dressed in my best outfit, a deep green velvet dress I'd splurged on specifically for this occasion, and even put on makeup and styled my hair, something I rarely bothered with these days. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. I couldn't wait to welcome them home. The grandfather clock in the hallway, another family heirloom, chimed 4 times. 4 o'clock, the arrival time we had agreed upon. I straightened a fork that didn't need straightening, adjusted a already perfect candle, and checked my reflection in the dining room mirror one final time. At 4:15, I sent a text. "Everything's ready. Can't wait to see you both." No response came. Perhaps they were driving and couldn't text. I moved to the living room window, pulling back the curtain to watch for headlights turning into my driveway. The street remained empty except for occasional passing cars, other people heading to their family celebrations. By 4:45, concern began to creep in. I called Andrew's cell phone, listening to it ring until his voicemail picked up. "Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. Just wondering what your ETA is. The food's ready whenever you are. Drive safely." At 5:15, I sent another text. "Is everything okay? Did you have car trouble? I can come pick you up if needed." Still nothing. The beautiful table sat waiting, steam no longer rising from the serving dishes. I turned the oven to low and returned the food to keep warm, though I knew prolonged heating would dry out the carefully prepared dishes. By 6 Hazurud, I had called 3 more times and sent 2 additional texts. The knot in my stomach grew tighter with each passing minute. Had there been an accident? Should I call hospitals? but surely someone would have contacted me if that were the case. Then my phone lit up with a text notification. Relief washed over me as I saw Andrew's name quickly replaced by confusion as I read his message. Sorry, Mom. Change of plans. Having dinner at Tiffany's parents' instead. Tiffany felt it was important. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading those cold words. Not even a phone call. Just a text sent 2 hours after they were supposed to arrive, after all my calls and messages. Tears blurred my vision as I typed back, I understand. Merry Christmas. My fingers shook so badly I had to correct several typos before sending. I looked at the dining room. The perfect table setting the carefully prepared food, the wrapped presents, all for nothing. The silence in the house seemed to mock me. I sat down at my place at the table, alone with 3 empty chairs surrounding me. I tried to eat something to salvage some small part of this disaster. I served myself tiny portions of each dish, but each bite felt like sawdust in my mouth. I couldn't swallow past the lump in my throat. As I reached for my water glass, my hand trembled so violently that I knocked it over. The crystal shattered against the hardwood floor, water spreading across the polished surface. Something inside me shattered too. I slid from my chair onto the floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled water, and finally allowed myself to sob. Great, heaving cries that seemed to come from the very center of my being. I had been abandoned by my only family on Christmas. The careful preparations, the expense, I could barely afford the hope I had nurtured. All of it wasted. All of it meaningless. Snow began to fall as twilight deepened into night. Thick, silent flakes drifted past my window, accumulating on the birdfeeder and garden bench. Any other Christmas, I would have found it beautiful. Tonight, it only emphasized my isolation. I couldn't bear to look at the uneaten feast any longer. I turned off the Christmas lights, silenced the holiday music playlist I had carefully curated. The house fell into darkness except for a small lamp in the living room. The sudden absence of festivity felt appropriate for my shattered expectations. My phone rang. Laura calling to wish me Merry Christmas and ask about the dinner. It went fine, I lied, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. They couldn't stay long, but it was nice to see them. That's great, Stella. I'm so glad it worked out. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Admitting I'd been abandoned seemed too humiliating, too final. After hanging up, I wandered through my dark house memories, ambushing me at every turn. The kitchen where Andrew would stand on a step stool as a boy helping me bake cookies. The living room where we built blanket forts on rainy days. The hallway where we marked his height on the wall every birthday until he outgrew his father. I considered calling Janet next door. She had invited me to join her family if I found myself alone, knowing my situation was precarious. But shame kept me from reaching for the phone. How could I explain that my own son had chosen not to come without making him look terrible or myself look pathetic? From my living room window, I could see into other homes on the street. Christmas trees glowed in windows, silhouettes moved behind curtains. Families gathered, celebrating together. I caught my reflection in the glass. An old woman alone on Christmas. When had I gotten so old? When had my life become so empty? I opened the bottle of expensive wine I'd bought specially for dinner. No point in saving it now. I didn't bother with a glass, drinking directly from the bottle as I sat in Robert's old armchair. The alcohol burned going down, but did nothing to warm the coldness spreading through my chest. In the bookshelf drawer, I found old photo albums. Andrew's baby pictures, his first day of school, family vacations, Robert teaching him to fish, all of us smiling, happy, connected. What had happened to that family? As the wine took effect, grief gave way to anger. I stormed to the Christmas tree and grabbed the carefully wrapped presents meant for Andrew and Tiffany. I threw them into the spare bedroom closet, unable to look at them anymore. $800 I couldn't afford wasted on people who couldn't even bother to call. My phone pinged again. A text, but not from Andrew. From Tiffany. Sorry for the late notice. Hope you're having a good Christmas. The impersonal message, clearly sent as an afterthought, possibly even at Andrew's insistence, ignited fury in me. Not even a real apology. Not even an acknowledgement of what they had done. I didn't respond. What could I possibly say? By 10 o'clock, I decided to go to bed. Christmas was nearly over, and sleep would at least provide escape from consciousness. I turned off the remaining lights, left the dishes unwashed, the food uncovered. In bed, I stared at the ceiling, questions circling in my mind like vultures. What had I done wrong as a mother? Was I too clingy, too needy? Did Tiffany hate me for reasons I couldn't fathom? Was Andrew ashamed of me, of my modest home and simple life compared to his in-laws' wealth? Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams where I called out for Andrew and he couldn't hear me. The gray light of dawn filtered through my bedroom curtains when I finally gave up on sleep. Christmas morning. Once a time of joy and anticipation, now just another day to get through. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering everything in a pristine white blanket. I made coffee on autopilot, avoiding looking toward the dining room with its evidence of last night's disappointment. A flutter of movement outside the kitchen window caught my eye. Birds had gathered at the feeder, which was nearly empty after days of neglect during my dinner preparations. Chickadees and cardinals contrasted brightly against the snow. Without thinking, I pulled on my robe and slippers, grabbed the seed container from the pantry, and stepped outside. The cold air bit at my face, but I barely noticed. Filling the bird feeder had been my morning ritual for years, one small constant in a changing world. As I approached, something unusual caught my eye. There, partially tucked into a crevice of the wooden feeder, was a small envelope protected from the snow by the feeder's roof. My name, Mom, was written on it in handwriting I recognized immediately. Andrew's handwriting. My hands trembled not from cold but from sudden emotion as I carefully extracted the envelope. Had he come by after all? When? Why leave a note instead of knocking on my door? I opened it with numb fingers. Inside was a brief note. Look where we used to hide our treasures. Sorry about dinner. It wasn't my choice. A small key fell into my palm as I unfolded the paper. I stared at it confused for a moment before understanding dawned. The treasure box. When Andrew was young, we had a special hiding place, a hollowed-out section in the old oak tree at the back of the yard. We used to leave little surprises for each other there, pretty rocks, interesting feathers, notes and trinkets, our secret place. Still in my robe and slippers, I trudged through the ankle-deep snow toward the ancient oak that had stood watch over our yard for generations. The hollow was still there, though I hadn't looked inside it for years. I reached in and found a waterproof container, the kind hikers use to protect matches and maps. Inside were 2 items, a thick envelope and a small box. I opened the letter first, my heart pounding. Mom, it began. If you're reading this, I couldn't make it to Christmas dinner, and I owe you an explanation. I've been trying to tell you for months, but it's been impossible. Tiffany monitors my phone. She reads my texts, checks my call history, even tracks my location. I'm not allowed privacy. I'm not allowed to see you without her approval, which comes less and less often. The dinner cancellation wasn't my decision. Her parents insisted we attend their event instead, and when I tried to suggest we do both, Tiffany threatened to tell everyone about my financial mistakes. Mom, I've made some bad investments. I owe her family money. They hold it over me, and I've been too weak, too afraid to stand up to them. I've been planning this message for weeks, waiting for a chance to place it where I knew only you would find it. Remember how we used to leave treasures for each other? You're the only one who would know to look here. I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused you. I'm sorry for my weakness, but I'm working on a plan. Please don't give up on me. Tears streamed down my face, freezing slightly in the winter air. I opened the small box next. Inside was a new cell phone with a note. I bought this with cash, so there's no record. My private number is programmed in. Only call when you're absolutely sure you're alone. I stood in the snow, clutching these secrets to my chest, a storm of emotions washing over me. Relief that my son still loved me. Horror at the reality of his marriage. Guilt that I hadn't recognized the signs. Determination that somehow I would help him. Later that day, after I had composed myself and made sure I was completely alone, I called the number on the secret phone. Andrew answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting by the device. Mom, did you find it? His voice sounded thin, anxious. I found everything, sweetheart, I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. Andrew, why didn't you tell me sooner? I couldn't, he whispered. She checks everything. This is the first phone I've had that she doesn't know about, and I have to keep it hidden in my car. What followed was a tearful conversation that broke my heart anew. Andrew described a relationship that had turned controlling shortly after the wedding. Tiffany's family wealth was used as leverage. They had loaned Andrew money to invest in a property development that had failed. Now, they held his debt over him, threatening financial ruin if he didn't comply with their expectations. "Her parents think you're beneath us," he admitted, shame evident in his voice. "They made it clear I was only acceptable because of my career prospects." Tiffany was raised to believe appearance is everything. She can't handle the thought of spending Christmas in a little house in the suburbs when her friends are at her parents' mansion. "But why didn't you just tell me?" I asked. "I was embarrassed, ashamed, and afraid you'd confront her, which would make everything worse." He paused. "Plus, she's convinced I'm too attached to you. She gets jealous of our relationship, says I need to prioritize her family now. When I defend you, she twists it to make me seem like a mama's boy." My anger turned to fierce determination. My son was in trouble, trapped in a controlling relationship, and I had missed the signs. "We need to meet," I said. "Somewhere safe." We arranged to meet at his office during lunch the following week. He assured me he could get away without suspicion, claiming a work meeting. After hanging up, I spent hours researching controlling relationships online. The patterns were clear now that I knew what to look for: isolation from family and friends, financial control, monitoring communications, emotional manipulation. My son was experiencing all the classic signs. I printed information about local resources, hotlines for domestic abuse, because control was abuse even without physical violence, and steps to protect himself legally. I withdrew $3,000 from my emergency savings, nearly everything I had, and placed it in an envelope. The meeting at Andrew's office broke my heart all over again. He looked thin, nervous, checking his watch constantly. His eyes darted to the door whenever someone walked past. This wasn't my confident, bright son. This was someone living in constant anxiety. "I can't stay long," he said after our brief hug. "Tiffany thinks I'm in a budget meeting." I pushed the envelope of cash across the small cafe table. "Take this. It's not much, but it might help if you need to leave quickly." Andrew's eyes widened. "Mom, I can't take your money. You're on a fixed income. I'm your mother. Let me help you." I reached across and squeezed his hand. "Have you thought about divorce?" He looked down. "Every day, but her father would destroy me professionally. He has connections everywhere in the industry, and the debt." He trailed off. "We'll figure it out," I promised. "But first you need to document everything, every controlling behavior, every threat. Save emails, texts, anything that shows what's really happening." We made a plan for regular communication through the secret phone. I gave him the name of my friend's son, a divorce attorney who could work discreetly. "I should have listened to my gut," he said as we parted. "I saw red flags, but I ignored them. She was so beautiful, so confident. I couldn't believe she chose me." I hugged him tightly. "You deserve to be loved for who you are, not controlled because of who someone wants you to be." As he walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt since Christmas Eve hope. The next 3 months were a careful dance of secret communications and planning. Andrew began documenting Tiffany's controlling behavior, saving texts and emails, recording conversations when possible. With each piece of evidence, his resolve strengthened. I connected him with my friend's son, the divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving financial control and emotional abuse. They met discreetly at coffee shops far from Andrew's usual haunts, building a case methodically. Andrew opened a secret bank account and began squirreling away small amounts of money, not enough to be noticed in their joint accounts, but enough to build an emergency fund. He reconnected with old friends Tiffany had deemed not good enough, meeting them during lunch breaks or fabricated work events. Slowly, I watched my son reclaim his confidence and sense of self. The fearful, anxious man I'd met at his office began to fade, replaced by glimpses of the strong, thoughtful person I'd raised. On Valentine's Day, I received an unexpected visit. Andrew showed up at my door while Tiffany was at an all-day spa retreat with her mother. "I couldn't stand the thought of you spending another holiday alone," he said, holding out a small bouquet of my favorite flowers. Daisies, nothing fancy, but perfectly meaningful. We sat in the kitchen drinking tea and talking openly for the first time in years. Andrew apologized repeatedly for his weakness, for missing Christmas, for not recognizing the unhealthy patterns in his relationship sooner. "There's nothing to forgive," I told him honestly. "When we're inside a controlling relationship, it's nearly impossible to see it clearly. The important thing is that you're taking steps now. By the following Christmas, everything had changed. Andrew had filed for divorce in the spring, armed with substantial evidence of emotional abuse and financial coercion. Tiffany's family had threatened lawsuits and professional sabotage, but Andrew's careful documentation and the support of his attorney had created a strong position. The divorce was finalized in November. Andrew had taken a job with a smaller firm, accepting a pay cut in exchange for freedom from his former in-laws' sphere of influence. He had moved into a modest apartment, started therapy, and even begun dating again. A kindergarten teacher named Melissa, who radiated genuine warmth when I met her briefly. When Christmas Eve came around again, I kept my expectations modest. I prepared a simple meal. Nothing elaborate, just comfort food we both enjoyed. I bought one thoughtful gift rather than extravagant presents. At exactly 4 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Andrew stood there, arms full of packages, snow dusting his shoulders, a genuine smile lighting his face. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, stepping inside to embrace me. We had a quiet, joyful dinner, just the two of us rebuilding our relationship, creating new traditions while honoring old ones. As we hung ornaments on my small tree, including the childish crafts he'd made decades ago, I reflected on everything we'd learned. Life teaches us its most important lessons through the hardest experiences. I'd learned that controlling relationships can happen to anyone, even strong, intelligent people like my son. I'd learned how isolation happens gradually, almost invisibly, until loved ones are separated by walls of fear and shame. Most importantly, I discovered that patient, unconditional love creates safe harbors where healing becomes possible. That terrible Christmas when I sat alone had been the darkest night of my life. But like so many painful moments, it contained hidden gifts, the catalyst for truth change and eventual healing. As I watch Andrew laugh while straightening a crooked ornament, I realize something profound. Sometimes what looks like abandonment is actually a cry for help. Sometimes the people who pull away most suddenly are the ones who need us most desperately. Have you ever noticed sudden changes in a loved one's behavior? Did they start missing family events, become distant, or change their personality around certain people? These might not be rejection. They could be silent signals that something is wrong. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If my experience helps even one person recognize these signs, please subscribe and share this video. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes love means looking beyond the surface to find the truth beneath.